particularly demand from Asia, will be such that I do not anticipate in the near future any serious fall in oil prices or in any difficulties with regard to meeting the Asian demand. The other issue that bedevils all discussion relating to energy security is prices. This is because the price of oil has nothing to do with the cost of production, and it has nothing to do with the simple laws of demand and supply. Today, oil prices are determined by speculators in the NYMEX and various other commodities exchanges. And for whatever reasons that may play at a particular time, you will find that prices now tend to hover around $100 for the last few years. Now, this is obviously a great bonanza for the producers and they have constantly changed upwards the threshold of acceptable prices for them. Many of us who have studied energy over the last few years will recall that as recently as 2004, the oil producers were content with a price band of $22 to $28, and now they feel, as their spokesman will say it to us, that they are quite comfortable with $100 per barrel. So this is the most important thing. There are various things that keep on happening that create a sense of panic among the speculators. Daniel Yergin has said that the speculators in oil have no knowledge of the commodity and have no knowledge of politics, but they are the ones who determine the price. So if there is anything that happens in the Middle East, for example, and a lot keeps on happening there all the time, you find that there is an immediate impact on oil prices. And therefore you have a kind of yo-yo effect. In various periods, suddenly you find that there is a certain positive movement in dialogue with the Iranians, and the price starts going down. And then you find that there is a panic because there could be war in the Middle East, and the price goes up again. And then again you have these larger issues that continue to be with us, and that is the economic scenario pertaining to Europe and the United States. Now, you have therefore depressing news coming from there. The prices fall down because there could be a loss in demand, and then again there is a Middle East crisis and the price goes up. So there is a very, very confusing situation that remains, and it's likely to continue in the years to come. In the meantime, when we had such grave economic situation and we had concerns relating to global growth and particularly growth in the European situation, you found that the Europeans in their wisdom suddenly declared sanctions against Iranian oil, following the Americans and going beyond, at a time when their own countries were critically dependent on Iranian oil. And certain countries like Greece got most of their oil from Iran. But that is where you see where politics works, that the politics can be sometimes suicidal for short-term advantage because you are following a certain policy or you're following the lead of someone who doesn't need Iranian oil. You follow his lead and harm yourself in the process. A little look at India. India's energy situation has been a matter of concern for several years to come. Has been for several years in the past and for years to come. We are very seriously import dependent. We today import more than 75% of our oil requirements, and it is projected that in the near future, over the 10-15 years, it will become 90%. Actually, in spite of the effort that we have mounted, we have not been able to significantly increase our own our own national production. There is a certain sameness with regard to the supply line as far as domestic production is concerned. So we are going to remain very, very importantly dependent on international resources. And then you, of course, have the wisdom of the Planning Commission enshrined in the Integrated Energy Policy Document 2006. Many of us who have lived here and experienced the Planning Commission know that they make some of the best documents in the world, and yet there is no mechanism available to them to actually implement any of the things they say. And therefore, their documents sometimes read like archival material. But this is the last, to my mind, is the last most important document that they prepared in 2006, took a holistic view of our energy requirements. They went beyond the hydrocarbon vision document of the year 2000 and looked at the scenario up to 2032, that is the end of the 15th five-year plan. They called for a massive expansion of our own domestic resources in terms of hydrocarbon, renewable, nuclear, and reform of the coal sector, etc. But again, whatever scenario they presented, and they presented several of them, all of them had one common point, and that was India's future remains with fossil fuels. We are a major consumer of coal, and coal dominates our energy mix, our national energy mix, and along with oil and gas, they will constitute between 75 to 90% of the energy mix of our country up to 2032. And given the fact that we are not going to produce enough of all this, and that the coal sector needs massive reform that seems to be beyond our political leadership, as of now, we are looking at external engagements, which are loosely referred to as energy diplomacy or oil diplomacy. Energy diplomacy of India, which has been with us for the last 7 or 8 years, is a robust engagement across the world in order to expand our own domestic capabilities on the one hand, and also expand our access to global resources on the other. So it's a multifaceted engagement that crosses continents and looks at various sources of partnership that would enhance our own capabilities and our resources. So we are in the business of acquiring stakes in producing fields, going into exploration and production areas, participating in refinery projects, participating in various investments that people may have, and generally looking at participation in a regional and global dialogue that would bring together our thinking and ensure that all our interests are on the same page. Now look at sub-Saharan Africa. I took a very quick look at it. Their power situation is extremely powerless. Perhaps it is slightly worse than our own, and ours is nothing to sing about, but theirs is very, very difficult. They have oil resources which are substantial, particularly in the case of Nigeria. They have deposits in various other places which are now commercially viable, and they have gas resources as well. The power scenario is extremely difficult, and compared to various other developing countries, it is much worse off in terms of what the people really need. And all of us know that unless you have access to power, it can debilitate your own capacity for industrial growth, for economic growth in general, and for the quality of life that your people need and deserve. It has obviously, therefore, political implications as well, because a distressed community is a very dissatisfied community. Dissatisfied with governance can lead to disturbances and lead to change of regime. Therefore, all of this is a very important continuous factor. So energy has implications for every individual in a polity, and regardless of the shape of the polity, you have to ensure and give to the people the promise of something better than what they have themselves. As far as this yardstick is concerned, the situation in Africa is extremely difficult and very, very challenging, and requires a tremendous effort. Indeed, I would say not just a national or continental effort, a truly global effort in order to see that we can ameliorate the situation that is prevailing in this continent. There are various reasons why this has happened: drought, war, or various oil prices, poor investments in the sector, etc. There are many people who, in their wisdom, the World Bank is just like our planning commission. They also prepare beautiful reports and they tell you how to run your life. They have done the same thing with regard to Africa. The report that came out in 2011, which was referred to earlier by the previous speaker, also gives us a fairly comprehensive view of the scenario in Africa and then tells you what you could do about it. As you know, it's much easier to write a report in Washington than to implement it in Abuja. Because you are asking countries to do things which are not politically feasible. But that's what happens, and that is where you get friendly suggestions like, oh, you must get rid of all your subsidies and ensure that the people pay the fair market price. You have that. You don't have a government left anymore. Then you must get all the private sector chaps to come in, you must do this, you must do that. It doesn't happen. It's going to be a very, very long haul. We know this from our own national experience. And we had extraordinary advantages compared to, say, Nigeria and many other countries that had civil war and military rule and various other barbarisms, many of them a legacy of the colonial depredations of the earlier period. Therefore, all of this is going to be an extremely difficult scenario for all of us in the years to come. Let me quickly look at us, India. What are we doing about Africa? Earlier, there was a certain sense of excitement. We were part of the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid struggle. There was a sense of being in solidarity with Africa. There was a term Afro-Asian Alliance, Afro-Asian Solidarity, and this was something very resonant. It was very important. All of us were part of it, and we remember it with great enthusiasm because it shaped our personalities and shaped our vision. Then there was a lull. I think sometime in the 70s and 80s, we went into our shell. I think we had our own domestic issues to cope with. We had a new generation emerging. They were questioning the political order. We had a lot of domestic strife. Africa too had more than its fair share of domestic issues as well at that time. The changes started occurring in 1990. In 1990, if I can put one date on it, I would suggest that emergence of South Africa as a rainbow nation, bringing to an end the apartheid era and therefore finally concluding the anti-colonial, anti-apartheid struggle that had been ongoing for 60, 70 years, gave us the promise of a new change, a new era. And I think that since then, we do have an African political renaissance. Today, the stage is therefore set for doing something new in Africa and giving a new value, new meaning, new shape to the concept of Afro-Asian solidarity that had a political value in the previous period and now can have an economic value in the present era as well. India is engaged with Africa. The engagement is substantial. In the last few years, we have given lines of credit, we have got Africa Fund. I don't want to belabor these points because it's well known, but at the same time, it is a drop in the ocean. The fact that India is interested in Africa is the important point to note, not the various values that are put on the screen before you. We have an Indian interest. It is an abiding interest. It is a long-term interest. It has economic value. It has cultural and sentimental value. Above all, it makes very good economic and political sense as well. Now, we have a certain presence in the hydrocarbon sector. Our companies have gone into Africa and looked at various E&P contracts. We are executing some of them as of now, not as much as we should, but still we are there, we are present. It's a competitive environment. All the world's major companies are there. They have very, very high signature bonuses on the table, and in a competitive environment, sometimes a PSU-related economy like ours in the hydrocarbon sector cannot be as competitive or as quick in terms of decision-making as is required. But at the same time, we are also looking at power projects, very, very peripheral at the moment, but we are doing certain things both through our public and private sector companies in different parts of Africa. Now, where do we go from here? We had the recent meeting of the BRICS Summit. The BRICS Summit took place in Durban. The major countries of the world outside the Western Alliance gathered together. They are brought together by BRICS. BRICS is therefore not just a gathering of 5 countries. It is an idea. It is the shape of things to come. It is a challenge for us to see how we can overturn this global order which has dominated us for the last 300 years and which has exploited us and which has destroyed our cultures and civilizations. How can we overturn it by then taking advantage of the resources that we ourselves have and using them cooperatively? This is the sense of the meeting at Durban. And Durban looked at Africa separately, especially there was a separate engagement with the African leaders in Durban. And this is one of the quotations that I have, that we are going, this is not, we have gone beyond sloganeering. We are today very practical. Some of our documents read like blueprints, that this is what we intend to do. This is what we intend to focus on: industry, focus on infrastructure, and then ultimately, and on foodstuff, food security, poverty eradication, sustainable development, all very substantial and significant requirements of this continent. This was the affirmation of solidarity of BRICS countries with Africa. And this is where we will go. We are interested in various ways we can go forward. I have put down 2 or 3 things that we could do. One of the things that I thought I should mention, when I was in Petroleum Ministry, I went to Nigeria in response to an invitation from their then Minister of Energy, who suggested to us something that was at that time novel and completely out of the box, and perhaps that is the reason it could not see the light of day. It needs imagination. He said, I'm offering you across the table 2 rich blocks offshore. I want you to take these blocks, study them, and make them commercially viable, and take advantage of the oil that emerges. No signature bonus is required. In return, over a 5 to 7 year period, upgrade our railway system, set up a new refinery for us, set up 4 small power projects in different parts of the country, and then help us with gas and set up the LNG terminal, and whatever gas you find, you can import at prices that based on the cost of production. This was an extraordinary win-win. What was the difficulty? Firstly, it was very good, very novel. What was the difficulty? The difficulty from the Indian side was that you had to bring on the same table, on the same side, the Petroleum Ministry. In the Petroleum Ministry, you have to bring OVL and GAIL, who don't speak to each other, who didn't speak to each other at that time. You have to bring the Railway Ministry, the Power Ministry. Power Ministry never spoke to the Petroleum Ministry at that time, did not join our delegation because they were sulking. But we still signed an MOU. We still signed a document, a consensual document, because OVL then told me, led by their managing director, he said, forget about this Power Ministry, we'll get people from the private sector, we will give them the project that they want. Unfortunately, because of change of the minister and change of certain other officers, we were not able to give shape to this. Perhaps it's not viable anymore in Nigeria, but certainly it is a model that we can go back to. It took me a long time to persuade my team, and I said to them, look, in 2 years, you will know the value of the fields they've given you. Today, you don't have anything, and you have to compete for these fields, and you have to spend several $1 million. Sometimes $250 million has to be put down as signature bonus, even if the well is dry. So you have a problem. Within 2 years, you will know the value of these fields. And during this period, what do you have to do? You just have to plan those major projects. Once you know the value of the fields, you can monetize that. You will have all the resources you need. But they need the projects now. They can't afford for you to monetize the value of the field 7 years later and then give them the projects. So this is the idea. This is what I call out-of-the-box thinking. Think new thoughts, which never occur to, because we are so boxed in our ministry, in our department, in our company. We very rarely have the capacity to think outside this and, say that, okay, I have got all the national resources I need, albeit they are in different departments and different boxes. Let me see if I can make it one big box and see we can go across to the Nigerians and talk to them. They got their act together because the energy minister was surrounded by the power minister, and he was surrounded, and he had the railway chief with him, and he had all the other people, 5 people sitting in front of us, and we were quarreling amongst ourselves. But we should not give up on this. There are capacities available which we have to. I'm not going to say that we have only things to teach. We are going to learn with them because we don't have our act together either. We have many things to go forward on. For example, the other thing is regional power trading. We have national power trading. We started only a few years ago. But we have not yet traded, to the best of my knowledge, outside India's borders. They want to do power trading across their continent, and they've already set up these various sectors. I think this is something that we can work with them. We will also benefit from this because there are plans to bring Central Asian power into India, across the Hindu Kush into Pakistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan into India, and then going on to Sri Lanka. These are the kind of new thoughts that have already emerged, and they are being discussed at various platforms, and it would be a pity if we forgot about them. Then, of course, there's hydropower. Hydropower, I know that the big projects in India are controversial, but in the African continent, there's tremendous potential for hydropower. And that is something that is clean energy. It just taps a natural resource that is available, causes the least disruption. It is something that we can look at, work together as partners, and benefit from each other's knowledge.